Let me ask you a question. Have you ever gone from a pro iPhone down to a non-pro iPhone? Because this is the first year I've ever been able to go for more than 2 weeks with a base model iPhone after using the Pro for so long beforehand. And the only reason I was able to do that is because the gap is thinner than ever between the iPhone 16 and the iPhone 16 Pro. But I have to admit, it was not fun going from 120 Hertz back down to 60 Hertz. But there's multiple reasons why I decided to keep using the iPhone 16. So in this video, I'm going to share my thoughts on the iPhone 16 Pro and the iPhone 16 after using both for about 3 months. Okay, so let's start with something that Apple has never done before. The iPhone 16 Pro has a bigger screen than the iPhone 16. Going back every year since the iPhone 12, the Pro model and the base model iPhones have had the same display size. But now the iPhone 16 has a 6.1 inch display and the 16 Pro has a 6.3 inch display. And while it doesn't seem like much, after spending extensive time with each of these, you can tell the difference, especially when you notice the thicker bezels around the display of the 16. Now, the footprint itself is about the same, but you can see a tad bit more content on the Pro, and watching videos, of course, is going to be a slightly better experience thanks to not only more real estate, but also those thinner bezels. So that was an unexpected move from Apple, but there's also another very unexpected move from Apple that I don't think anybody expected, and that is the fact that the camera control button is on both the iPhone 16 and the iPhone 16 Pro. But not just that, the iPhone 16 also gets the action button. So last year, this was a Pro exclusive for the iPhone 15 series. This action button is what replaces the mute switch. So now the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro have the exact same buttons on the outside. And while some people think that these buttons are just a gimmick and that they're not actually useful, I find myself using them all the time, especially the action button. I use the action button multiple times per day. Like I use it every single night to trigger the flashlight and almost every day to trigger ChatGPT's advanced voice mode. And for the camera control button, I don't use this every day, but I do use it a few times a week for quickly taking pictures and also to use the new visual intelligence feature, which lets you identify objects or places by simply pointing your camera at it. It's really awesome. And here's the thing, a lot of people thought that we would see some exclusive features for the Pro model when it comes to camera control or the action button, but here we are multiple months later and they have the same functionality. So I think the fact that we have the same exterior buttons and also the same software functionality with those buttons on the Pro and the base model is amazing. And I think that's going to make the purchasing decision a lot easier for a lot of people. But even if you don't care about the buttons on the iPhones, you have to admit that the iPhone 16 crushes the iPhone 16 Pro in terms of color selection this time around. So ultramarine is the one that I kept, and this is gorgeous. I mean, teal is another stunning color, but nothing touches ultramarine in my opinion. Honestly, all the colors for the iPhone 16 are great. Meanwhile, the Pros come in a new desert titanium color, which I did like at first. I actually said in my video that that was going to be the one that I end up keeping. However, ultimately, I decided to keep the white titanium for my main phone just because the white looked better than last year's white. But obviously, pretty boring colors, and especially when you wear a clear case or no case like I do, it's usually one of those two. I like to be able to see the color of my iPhone, and it actually matters. So the 16 just felt so much better when I can see this amazing color every single day. But as far as the build quality goes, the Pro is made with titanium and the base 16 is made with aluminum. So titanium was a big selling point last year with the 15 Pro, and it does make a difference compared to stainless steel. You know, it's much lighter and feels better in the hand to use, but compared to aluminum, yes, it feels more premium and durable, but the aluminum 16 is still around 15% lighter. And holding the 16 in the hand is just a bit more effortless and doesn't feel quite as heavy in the pocket. I wouldn't really classify the 16 Pro as feeling like a brick in the pocket like the Pro Max does, but you know, it's still a good bit heavier when you have it in your pocket compared to the 16. And the 16 has a color-infused matte glass back, while the 16 Pro has a textured matte glass back. But honestly, they both look and feel about the same, and they do also both have the same IP68 water and dust resistance. Okay, I get it. You don't care about the colors, you don't care about the durability. Well, let me tell you one thing that you will care about, and that is the software, because This year, another kind of unexpected thing is that all iPhone 16s get Apple Intelligence. So last year with the Pro models, we saw the 15 Pro and Pro Max get Apple Intelligence, but not the 15 and 15 Plus. But this year, both of these phones get Apple Intelligence, and so far, every single Apple Intelligence feature is available on both. And that, of course, is thanks in part to the fact that we have 8 gigabytes of RAM now across the board. So the Pro and the base model both have the same 8 gigs of RAM. And also, of course, we do have the updated chipset inside that allows for Apple Intelligence. And maybe I'm the minority, but I use Apple Intelligence every single day, dozens of times a day. Like I use writing tools, I use Genmoji, I use the summarized notifications, and I definitely use ChatGPT several times per day. And it was really nice to be able to go from a 16 Pro down to the base model and not feel like I'm missing out on anything software-wise, especially when it comes to Apple Intelligence. That was a big deal for me. But I have to say there is a downside to Apple Intelligence, and that is the battery drain. So ever since 18.1 launched with writing tools and the other more basic Apple Intelligence features, battery drain was kind of bad. Like it was noticeable. But with 18.2, not only because we have ChatGPT support, but we also have Genmoji and Image Playground, I found that those applications and using ChatGPT often definitely drain the battery quite a bit. So if you're on the go a lot and you use Apple Intelligence, you might need to pick up a mobile charger. And today's sponsor, EcoFlow, has you covered. This is EcoFlow's rapid magnetic power bank, and it's perfect for when you're on the go since it's both compact and it magnetically attaches to your iPhone via MagSafe. And this will charge up your iPhone 16 or 16 Pro at a full 15 watts since it's Qi 2 certified and also uses EcoFlow's patented X-Stream technology, which allows you to get this fast charging in such a small, compact form factor. And this guy is 5,000 milliamp hours, so it will be able to charge an iPhone 16 Pro all the way up from 0 on a single charge, no problem. But here's something I didn't expect this little guy to have. So there's also a 30-watt built-in cable if you want to charge faster. This will get you from 0 to 50% charge in 26 minutes, and that's fast since other power banks can take up to 3 times as long. Now, wireless charging, of course, will take a little bit longer, getting to 50% in about 50 minutes. But it's not just fast at charging your iPhone, it's also fast to charge up the power bank as well. So it goes from 0 to 70% in just 33 minutes. So yeah, whenever I travel for CES in a few weeks, I will definitely be carrying this EcoFlow rapid power bank with me to charge up my iPhone, my AirPods, or whatever else needs to be charged up. So go ahead and check out the link in the description below to pick up your EcoFlow rapid power bank today. Now, I mentioned how the iPhone 16 Pro does not have any exclusive software features in terms of Apple Intelligence over the iPhone 16, but when it comes to the audio mix feature, the new audio mix feature, we do have an exclusive mode on the iPhone 16 Pro, which is called Studio. So this takes advantage of the Pro's studio quality 4-mic array, and this can help make your voice basically just sound more like it was recorded professionally in a studio. Okay, so it's been a couple of months since I've tried out the audio mix feature. So we're gonna test it out and see if the studio setting with the audio mix actually makes me sound better than the default iPhone microphone. All right, I get it. Let's address the elephant in the room, the display. The 60 hertz versus 120 hertz debate that's never gonna have a resolution, but let's talk about it. First off, let me just say that both of these phones have the same Super Retina XDR OLED display, along with the same 1000 nits of typical brightness and a 1 nit minimum brightness. But of course, the biggest difference here is the refresh rate. We have 60 hertz on the 16, 120 hertz on the 16 Pro. And that ProMotion display also gives the 16 Pro the always on display, which is nice to have, but honestly, it's not as big of a deal to me as it used to be. I have it off most days when I'm working because it can be pretty distracting. But man, every time I go from using a Pro iPhone back down to a base model iPhone with 60 hertz, I can always feel and see the difference. The ProMotion display just plays tricks on your mind because everything appears smoother, faster, and just more fluid compared to the 60 hertz screen on the 16. However, I have to address that not everybody notices this. Like, I notice this because I'm on my phone all day. Like, it's what I do for a living. I'm supposed to notice every single change in the display. But it's not just me. There's other people around me as well in real life that aren't super crazy into tech that also notice the 120 hertz refresh rate. They can see the difference. But I know for a fact that that is not everybody. Like my parents, certain other people around me cannot tell a difference to save their life between 120 hertz and 60 hertz. So it really just depends on you. Your decision, your opinion is going to be different than everybody else's because your eyes are your eyes only. So I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you to get one or the other because, again, it's just subjective. It really just depends on your personal taste and your personal opinion, and you should go in and use a 120 hertz refresh rate device if you've not done so before to see if you can tell a difference. But I will say that one thing you might have a tough time at telling the difference between is the camera systems on both of these phones because they take very similar photos. So both the 16 and 16 Pro have a 48 megapixel main fusion lens and an ultra wide lens, and your basic everyday shots are going to look nearly identical. Now the Pro does have an additional telephoto lens and a LiDAR scanner. However, the telephoto only makes a noticeable difference when zooming in and taking portrait shots. Having that 5x optical zoom option is nice, and I do use it quite a bit, but it never really makes or breaks my photos unless they're portrait shots. The 5x portrait shots on the 16 Pro are consistently better than the 2x portrait shots that I get from the 16. The bokeh is just more intense, the subject is cut out more precisely, and it just looks better like 95% of the time. Now the ultra wide lens on the 16 Pro is 48 megapixels versus 12 megapixels on the 16. So if you're taking a lot of 0.5x shots, you will notice a difference in quality, especially if you zoom in and pixel peep. However, the iPhone 16's ultra wide lens now has autofocus, which means that it can shoot macro shots. And this was previously a Pro exclusive, but now you can do this on the base model. And this is actually something I use quite often to get closer to a subject, whether I'm in photo or video. And it can make the picture a little bit grainy in videos. I don't like to have this turned on for videos because it really makes them grainy even with good lighting conditions. But for photos, macro shots are awesome. And also 90% of the time, I'm not even taking an actual macro shot. I'm just kind of getting closer to a subject, if that makes sense. Anyways, the big difference between these two in terms of the cameras is going to be pretty much the same thing that it is every single year, and that is number 1, Pro RAW, and number 2, ProRes. Being able to shoot photos in RAW gives you a lot more flexibility to manipulate the colors after you take the shot. If I'm going somewhere and I'm taking an important photo, I always take it in RAW. I always shoot it in Pro RAW. That way I can manipulate the colors easier later and just make the image look better after the fact. But what makes an even bigger difference is ProRes video. So shooting video in ProRes is phenomenal on the iPhone 16 Pro. It's something that I can never switch to the iPhone 16 for because you don't get ProRes video. 4K is not enough when you have 4K Pro RAW, especially when you can shoot in log. I shoot a lot of my B-roll here on the channel using my iPhone 16 Pro, shooting in ProRes log, and I'm sure that most people can never tell the difference. That's how good the quality is. And if you don't know what log is, it's pretty much like raw photos, but for video. It just retains the most data possible, and it also comes out looking very flat when it comes straight out of the camera, since it's meant to be color graded later on. And now with apps like Kino, you can add instant color grading straight from the app, which means that you don't even need to use software like Final Cut Pro to edit your log footage. So it's easier than ever to shoot and log on the iPhone, and I am so here for that. I love it. Now, the only downside to ProRes is that the file sizes are absolutely gigantic. So that's one reason that I always have an SSD. I always offload my videos to an SSD. And that's another area I want to hit on, because if you do transfer via a wired connection, the Pro is going to transfer those videos faster than the 16 since it supports USB 3. Meanwhile, the iPhone 16 has USB 2 speeds. So that's 10 gigabits a second versus 480 megabits a second. So the Pro is going to be 20 times faster at transferring data than the regular 16. So obviously that's not going to apply to you if you don't transfer data very often. But for me, as somebody who does that on a consistent basis, that's a pretty big deal. But aside from ProRes, the only main difference I've been able to tell between the 16 and 16 Pro when it comes to video is being able to shoot in 4K 120 FPS. It's not something I do very often, but it is a really cool feature to have, mainly for slowing down that footage to create smooth slow-mo shots. And now once again, just like Kino, you can do this built in with the camera application and the Photos application. So yes, there are notable differences between the camera quality and video quality, especially on the 16 and 16 Pro. But what about when it comes to the performance? Because like we said earlier, they both have 8 gigs of RAM, so how do they perform against each other? And honestly, there's really not a big difference whatsoever. Like in the 3 months I've used both of these phones, I don't think there's been one time where I felt like I was missing something or I felt like I should be on the other device and I wouldn't have that lag. Like those thoughts never crossed my mind, not even one time, which is also extremely rare for me. So the 16 has the A18 chip and the 16 Pro has the A18 Pro chip. And since I'm not a gamer or a mobile video editor, I can barely tell the difference between the Pro chip and the non-Pro chip. Like with the A18 Pro, you do get an extra GPU core, so gaming will absolutely be a little bit more fluid and better. But with social media apps, browsing Safari, and using other light apps like I do on a daily basis, there is no noticeable difference day to day. Like I said, there's not been one time where I wished I had the Pro when I was using the 16. But one thing that's not the same is the thermals inside. So we have a new thermal structure for the iPhone 16 Pro, so it doesn't heat up as previous Pro models did, and honestly, it doesn't even heat up as much as my base iPhone 16 does. The 16, I've noticed time and time again, gets hotter than the iPhone 16 Pro. Now, is that a big deal? No, it never gets like blazing hot where it's burning my fingers off, nothing like that. It's very faint, but it is something I have noticed. But what's really weird here is that I'm not noticing a big difference in battery life on the 15 versus the 15 Pro. And if you look at Apple's website, they claim that there's going to be a 4 to 5 hours of additional battery on the Pro. And if you look at some of these other people on YouTube, you know, they're seeing better battery life as well on the Pro, like much better. People claim it's much better in my comments, but for me, I'm not seeing it. I am not seeing a big difference in battery life between the 16 and the 16 Pro, which has really surprised me. Like, yes, clearly the iPhone 16 Pro gets better battery life. I'm noticing like an hour and a half of additional on-screen time, but the reality is I only have to charge each of these phones once per day. And that is a big win for the base iPhone 16 because that's not something that normally happens when I test these phones. So the battery life on the 16 is great. And it's also nice that both of these phones can charge up wirelessly at 25 watts using Apple's new MagSafe charger. Okay, so all in all, I have to say it, I think the iPhone 16 is the best value iPhone that Apple has ever made. My opinion might change when the iPhone SE 4 comes out in early next year, but for now, I think the 16 is the best valued iPhone out there. Because again, not only do the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro both get Apple Intelligence support, but they also perform nearly the same in typical daily use. They also both have the action and camera control buttons, and there's not a huge difference in battery life. The features that make the biggest difference between these two phones are catered to pros. Who would have guessed it? So unless you absolutely need the best photo and video quality, and you're somebody who shoots in ProRes log, and you're somebody who shoots their photos in ProRAW, there's really no reason to go for the iPhone 16 Pro over the iPhone 16 unless, again, it comes down to the 120 hertz refresh rate. If you're somebody who needs that ProMotion display, obviously the Pro is going to be the choice for you. But again, the whole refresh rate thing is something that you will have to decide, and you should not listen to somebody online telling you to pick one over the other because, again, it's all up to you and what you visually feel and see. So yeah, for those reasons, I think that most people should go ahead and get the regular iPhone 16 instead of the 16 Pro because there is a $200 difference between the two. I know it's the same conclusion I came to in a previous video I did here on the channel, but I wanted to give you guys an update after spending more time using both of these phones. So I hope it helped you out. If it did, I would appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. Also, be sure to subscribe if you want to see more iPhone 16 reviews and other reviews here on the channel. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.